Listener emails and green comet observations on episode 301 of the Actual Astronomy Podcast. I'm Chris, and joining me is Shane. We are amateur astronomers who love looking up the night sky. And I'm wondering, did anybody see Comet E3ZTF as green? Did you, Shane?
I did not. I saw it as gray, pretty much like every other comet I've looked at. And from what I've been reading, a lot of the visual observations, I don't think I've seen anybody report colors yet, but certainly in the photographs, it's a nice green.
Cool. Yeah. Oh, we should do a few Patreon thank yous to Gene, Chris, and Dave, who recently increased their Patreon support. We really appreciate it. Your financial support both helps keep the show going, as costs do sometimes creep up, and that's all good, but it also helps to motivate us to keep going. So thank you so much for your increased donations and for everybody else who continues to donate.
Yeah, big thanks to all of those folks.
I thought maybe we would start with a few podcast updates, Shane. So this is going to come out after our hopefully live presentation with the Kitchener-Waterloo Center as episode 300. This will be 301, and we're sort of progressing towards getting that show released. But this week we sort of had a very exciting milestone that we passed as far as our downloads or listens were concerned.
Yeah, we hit 250,000. So thanks to everybody for contributing to that. Chris, you mentioned kind of the motivation, and certainly just knowing people are listening is motivation too. So it's great to hit that. And I guess the next big one is 300,000. So that'll probably come sooner than we expect.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to do it and to watch those downloads. One thing that I watch quite a bit, as you know, Shane, is I'll watch to see how quick the downloads are happening to determine how interested people are in a particular episode, because we've noticed that the more interested people are, or the different promotional tactics we might use to get the show out there, will determine by a pretty huge margin how many downloads that show gets. It's quite surprising. Some shows will only get a few hundred downloads within the first 10 or 12 hours. Another show might get quite a bit more, maybe 2 or 3 times as much. So it's pretty cool. A few of the things that we're working towards, though, is we're doing a few more interviews or having guests on. It wasn't so much planned as just working out that way. I'm having a lot of fun doing it. How about you, Shane?
Oh yeah, I love talking to other folks in the hobby, and again, sort of one of the unexpected benefits of starting this podcast is the connections that we've made like that, Chris, and having the conversations, with Dave and Mark Radici and on and on. We probably should have a list and a count, because I'm not sure what our count is in terms of guests, but it's quite a few, certainly well into the double digits.
And now that we have, kind of regularly, each episode's getting about 1,000 listens, which isn't huge by any kind of standard, but we're not necessarily going for the largest number. If we wanted to get the largest number, we would simply take the big astronomy topic of the week, spin that into an episode, and then have like 10,000 listens or 100,000 listens or something. We're trying to do a podcast on amateur astronomy, and that's our goal and that's our focus. So we would rather have like that 1,000 people who are actual amateur astronomers like us listening to the podcast, which I think is more or less what we have. But we also have many sort of friends and then sort of online people that we've forged connections with. And kind of before we had, in a way, like enough listeners to bring in guests, it was sort of fun just to have our friends and other amateurs that we know listening in. And the odd time we would just bring somebody in because they'd been writing us about a topic. Like I know Bill Weir had written us about a few things. We're like, hey, let's just come on the show and let's talk about it, like big telescope observing or some of the other topics that we've had him on about. But now we're kind of getting to the point where we sort of have enough listeners. Mark Radici from Refreshing Views reached out because he's going down to the Winter Star Party. When you hear this, it'll be like he'll be down there, I think. And when he comes back, we're going to talk to him about the Winter Star Party. And we heard a lot of feedback from Dave Chapman's Stars You Should Know, and working to arrange with him to come on in March. And then old friend of mine was contacted by Dave about listening to the show, and he wrote us a really nice email saying he had been listening to the show and was sending along his kind words of encouragement and support. So we're going to have Craig Levine on, who I think people will be really interested to hear what Craig has to say. I've known Craig, I think, for like 25 or 30 years. Like, he was one of the first people I met when I joined an astronomy club. And one of the things that's interesting about Craig is that he's a gear collector. And so he has a lot of interesting, like, home built telescopes, like 13-inch Dobsonian. He's got some astrophysics equipment. And then he's recently going to receive a gift from his brother, who is also a gear collector, because his brother is too busy to do amateur astronomy anymore. And so Greg is going to kindly hold his gear for him, and he's going to come on and talk to us about that equipment that's coming in. So that should be pretty interesting as far as a very gear-centric conversation goes. So I'm excited for that one. I think you'll really enjoy it, Shane.
Yeah, that sounds super interesting. Looking forward to that.
I'm working on hopefully getting an observatory built. I've kind of been saving up for, I forget it. My wife told me how many years it was. It's hard to believe, sort of squirreling away the money for a long time, since even before I really had, bought any kind of land to put an observatory on. It was always sort of my thought that I would get one. And so I'm thinking about maybe making something to put out with that. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, right on.
So we had a question from Gene. Do you want to read what Gene wrote, or do you want me to read it? Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I can read it.
Yeah, go for it.
So Gene said, if you think it's show worthy, I'd love to hear why you recommend Sky and Telescope's Sky Atlas versus the other ones. There's one that's enormous, ones that are black and white, laminated, unlaminated, etc. Would also love to hear how you mark it up, or how you plan your night, or how you use it in real time. Probably some common sense stuff, but I'd love to hear your thoughts, and your thoughts if you think others would as well. I think this is a great topic. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, we did a bit of an episode on this a while back, but I think that these are really nice, brief questions. So first of all, Shane, I'll just say the reason why I recommend the Pocket Atlas, and then maybe you can chime in. I think you might have a slightly different recommendation. So I think I'm the one that kind of pumps the Sky and Telescope Pocket Atlas a little bit more than the others. And one of the reasons is that it's a very affordable atlas. I think for a long time it was around $20 American. Maybe it's like 25 now, but it's very affordable. It's based on Will Tirian's Sky Atlas 2000, which was sort of the first big recommended Sky Atlas for people to buy, except that this one's much smaller and more convenient to carry around. The Sky Atlas 2000 is a very large atlas. So I think the Pocket Atlas, or whatever it's called, I think you can buy it in a few different versions, but it's basically like regular book size. It doesn't quite fit in a pocket, at least no pocket that I have, but it's really not much bigger than a pocket. It definitely fits well in with your observing gear, versus Sky Atlas 2000. You almost need to take like a separate table out with you to use. And the Sky Atlas 2000 was, and it may still be, as far as I know, available in, you can get black on white, laminated, unlaminated, color edition. The Pocket Atlas just comes with the black stars on the white background. And the Pocket Atlas also draws in the main constellation patterns. So it makes it easy for people who are transitioning from just using like an all sky map to a more dedicated star atlas. So I think it helps in that transition, versus some of the other atlases like the enormous. Gene referred to the enormous one. I'm thinking he's referring to Uranometria. I have a copy of that, which is like the I don't know. It's just a massive book. I think it weighs I don't know, like 8 pounds or something like that. I have it. It's awesome. It's so zoomed in and huge, though. It can be a bit of a challenge to use. You almost need to have like the Pocket Atlas to use as a starting point, and then use the Uranometria to zoom in. You almost, at least for me anyway, I know other people might be better at using it than I am. I have to like use an intermediary atlas to actually make the Uranometria worthwhile. But Shane, what's your recommendation? Because I think you use the double star atlas or something like that a little bit more than maybe I do.
Nope. It's all about Pocket Sky, the Pocket Sky Atlas for me as well. I love that one. It's like you mentioned, it's inexpensive, so that's great because if you're using an atlas at the eyepiece, it means that it's probably collecting dew throughout the night, and it also means that it probably is going to get knocked around and fall on the ground, because that's just what happens when you're observing in the dark. And if I happen to damage it, I'm not too, unhappy, because it's inexpensive and I can go buy a new one if I want. It's readily available. So I think it's the ideal atlas at the eyepiece, again, largely due to its size. It covers everything you could probably want to know in the night sky, unless you're really starting to get into faint stuff, because you have a larger aperture. You may want some of the other atlases because they go a little deeper in terms of magnitude. But no, I love the Pocket Sky Atlas. I do have the Cambridge Double Star Atlas, that I don't actually use all that much as an atlas, but I do love the double star lists that they have in there. And sometimes I use those as references for my double star observing. But I also have Uranometria. I have Sky Atlas 2000, both laminated and not laminated. I have, what is that other one that we have?
Interstellarium.
Yeah, that one too.
That's my most used atlas. And there's a few reasons why. Ronald Stoyan created it. And one of the atlases, which isn't really quite an atlas that I used very heavily before and still do, is the Cambridge Photographic Atlas, which is more like it's sort of unfortunate in a way, because they made it more like a bookshelf book. It has like these beautiful glossy pages. But I like the selection, sort of off the beaten track, like asterisms and star clusters that aren't in many of the other atlases. And I love them. They're really great for small telescopes. And sort of on the left side, you have a chart. And the chart is based on a negative of a photograph that's on the right side. I really like it, although there's some small areas of the sky that are missing, or there's like overlap in weird spots. But in general, I like that. So when he came out with Interstellarium, which is more like just a regular proper atlas, no photographs, it's just like this very heavy duty paper that can be used outside, I was like, oh, I'm going to get that. The things that I like about Interstellarium are it is big, but it's not that big. I can still take it out, use it on my observing table, but there's still room for like my eyepiece case and other stuff that I have around. It's very heavy duty. So even though I've used and abused that atlas pretty darn good, because I'm out in the field, I'm not really taking care of my stuff that well, to be frank, folks. But that atlas is still pretty much just like new. There's a few like little creases in that on the cover pages and that, but it's fine. Some people don't like it. So the things that I like about it are that it has labels for filter types for different nebulae. It has the lines drawn in for the constellation, which allows me to quickly orientate myself, like especially when I'm tired. And then, I think it has nice sky coverage. Some of the shortcomings, and some people don't like it. I do like it. I recommend it. But again, it's pretty deep and involved, more so than the Pocket Atlas. And I think it would overwhelm somebody who is just buying an atlas for the first time. So I think maybe the Pocket Atlas is a better place to start, especially since like I have an interest in sort of more of the off-beaten path stuff. And they do include that in Interstellarium. Some of the things that people don't like, and I got to say, I agree with the criticism that the indices, or like the pages that kind of tell you, which charts have which constellations. For some reason, I don't find it very intuitive. Like just the way they have it laid out, I always find it like really difficult to find the chart, like which chart is Orion on. Like I almost have to like remember it. And then as well, sometimes they use like sort of different names and off the beaten path names. And one of the reasons for that is that this is an atlas that comes off a press in Europe. And it's also heavily influenced, I think, by astronomers in Africa as well, and in some other places. So it's more in a way like a global atlas. It doesn't necessarily use the same common names for objects that we might traditionally think of things in North America. So that can be one of the challenges. Anyway, that's just a little review. Shane, do you have any insight into your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love Interstellarium. It's probably of all of the atlases we've talked about, it's the only other one that I can that is easy to use at the eyepiece because it's not in an enormous physical sized book, but it goes into a ton of detail. It's spiral bound. The other thing I really like about Interstellarium is the optional guide that you can purchase. And what I
Mm-hmm.
like about the guide is it basically highlights all of the key deep sky objects that are, in the atlas. But then it also shows these objects through different apertures, and it's sketches and photographs. So what I like about that is it gives you an idea of what you should see, but it also then has a breakdown of like it's a chart for each like atlas page, I guess, and that chart lists the deep sky objects, but it also lists them according to recommended aperture to observe them. So at a quick glance, if you're observing with a 4-inch refractor like you and I do, you can quickly see, oh, it's these 5 NGCs I should
Mm-hmm.
probably target, as opposed to skipping the ones that are listed for, say, a 12-inch aperture. So I do enjoy the guide. I find it quite useful for planning your session prior to going out.
When you are planning a session, that's sort of a good way. So you use the guide for Interstellarium, which is a whole separate book, which is almost the same size as Interstellarium itself. And then you use the Interstellarium. But do you do any markup, or do you just kind of, okay, on these pages, I'm going to focus on these objects, then you kind of just sort of get Interstellarium open to those pages? Or do you do any other markup or any other way of noting where in the charts you're going to be looking?
Yeah, I do mark up. And then this is a tip I stole from you,
Okay.
and it's using those little post-it arrows.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'll do is figure out what objects I want to observe. I will put these post-it arrows pointing to the object that I want to see. And I usually write like the NGC number on the post-it note. And this way, I know exactly what to look for when I'm actually observing later on in the night. But it also doesn't like destroy my atlas. When I'm done observing those objects, I can rip the post-it arrows off there. There's no damage. And I, just kind of repeat that process. And I never did that in the past. At night, I would always have my observing list. But then I found I was spending, I wouldn't say a significant amount of time, but you do spend time just trying to find the object in the atlas.
And that's the least enjoyable time at the telescope.
Totally. And, under a red light, and it's just
Yeah.
not that fun.
Yeah.
So doing it ahead of the observing session was revolutionary, and
Yep.
being
Oh, yeah.
using those post-it notes is definitely the way to go. I would never observe without doing that now.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I do the exact same thing. And people can develop their own method of doing this, but I've used Post-it notes to both sometimes just to mark the atlas pages. So like I was saying, the index isn't as good as I think it could have been in Interstellarium. So I just take a Post-it note and just like these are the charts for Orion, or these are the charts for whatever constellations I'm going to look at. And then if like, sometimes I'm just like, okay, I'm not sure what I'm going to look at in those charts. I'm going to just work it through. I'll just do that. But then if there's like particular things that I'm going to look at, then I'll just, I've even been able to find like little arrow stickies. It's not like a full post note. They're just like a little sticky. And then I'll just sometimes I'll just stick them on because maybe there's only 2 or 3 objects that kind of know what they are. Or if I'm going to do like 10 or 12 objects, then like Shane, I'll write them in big letters. So then you're not kind of straining to see which is NGC 5048 and which is NGC 5051 or like whatever they are. So,
Well, and an advantage to the post-it arrows is like they're translucent as well.
That's right. Yeah.
So even though they're sort of covering up some of your atlas, you can see through it, which is nice.
Yeah, they're little. Yeah. And people should be able to find these anywhere. And they're pretty inexpensive. So this is like one of those little tips and tricks, I think. Like, when people are getting started, it's the red light and getting a good guide like Night Watch and a few other things like that. And then kind of once people get the telescope, I think getting a good guide like whether it's Sky Atlas 2000, especially laminated if you're going to use it in the field, or Unimetria if you really want to dive deep and have a big scope, or Interstellarium if you're sort of somewhere in the middle like we are, then just using these sticky notes can be very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
We had our first email from somebody that's in New Zealand, not somebody that just visited New Zealand, because I think we've had a couple people that message us with visiting New Zealand. But shall I read this one from Andrew?
Yeah, sure.
I'm probably going to say this wrong, but Andrew starts with Kira Ora from the other land down under, which is New Zealand. First, the usual introduction and background. I'm very new to astronomy and recently came across your podcast and I'm hooked. Well, thanks, Andrew. We appreciate you listening and writing. Currently, my rate of consumption is about 3 episodes every 2 days. Clearly, you have to keep up the cadence to keep up with my addiction. We will do our best. We have people who go through and listen to the entire series of podcasts that we've put out. And I think that was a big surprise to me, maybe less so for you, Shane. But when we were doing this, I thought, well, as people find the show and then listen to it, they'll just sort of listen to it from kind of more or less where they caught in, or maybe they would go back and just listen to a few past episodes. But it seems like a lot of people do go and listen to the full run.
Yeah, it's that's great. There's some of this stuff is time sensitive and probably has expired, but some of it, lives on and is just a good reference. So there's definitely some good information back there for folks that maybe haven't listened to all of them.
So he goes on to say, now the agony aunt question. That must be a New Zealand phrase. I do like it though. I currently have a 10-inch Dobsonian with a fairly good eyepiece selection and have been loving it. My main issue is setup time and dragging it out of the house, not exactly grab and go. So I've been looking to get a complementary refractor, probably a Skywatcher 102 or something similar. The dilemma is that a TeleVue 76, which is an f6.3 3-inch telescope with diagonal and rings, has come up for sale at a very good price. I'm building a new home, and so while I could possibly swing the Skywatcher, I really want the TV 76, but this would probably entail giving up the Dobsonian. Just wondering how much I will be losing visually by making that call. It is a huge aperture loss, but I imagine the wide field views through the 76 would be fantastic. The only thing making me consider this is that I know in the future another Dob will be fairly easy to get. However, the TeleVue 76 is a scope that I would have a great deal of trouble getting past his significant other. He concludes by saying, "Na Mia," which I'm sure I'm not saying correct, and signs off as Andrew. So Shane, I think the question is, keep the 10-inch Dob, get a less expensive 4-inch Achromat, or sacrifice the 10-inch Dob and go for the 3-inch wide field apochromatic telescope. What are your thoughts on this? Where would you go? How would you handle this?
Well, first off, there's not a bad choice here. This is all really good options to have. Oh, geez, I just yanked on a cord. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I think some of this too depends, I think, on what he wants to observe and how you want to observe. What would I do in this case? I would probably try to keep the 10-inch for sure. But, one of the things he mentioned was in New Zealand, the used market isn't like super robust. So you don't have a lot of options to buy used gear. And when something good pops up, you really have to jump on it. The TeleVue 76 would be one of those appos you buy once and you've got that checked off for the rest of your life. That's a great 3-inch refractor, pretty hard to beat. So if the price was right, I guess I would probably side with where I think Andrew was already going, which is do what I have to get the TeleVue 76, enjoy that. The ability to observe a lot more with a small grab and go like that is quite astonishing to me. When I got my little 3-inch, I couldn't believe how much I used it, which was great. So there's that factor there too. So yeah, I think I'd probably jump on the Teleview 76 and then sort the rest out later. If it means selling the 10-inch, so be it. You can always rebuy that at a future point in time.
I think, Shane, I think you make a good argument here. And I think just based on how I've seen you navigate these things, because I feel like Andrew's more of your mindset. And if he, or like anybody else, like we just do this for fun, and if he's thinking, you know what, I really want to try a little refractor, this is going to have to be the choice. This is kind of what I want to do. Should I do it? You know what? Just go and do it. Mm-hmm. If that's what you want to do, and like this is just supposed to be something fun that we're all doing, and you think that's going to be fun for you, go and try it. If a Teleview 76 is available in your area, otherwise it's difficult to get, and you use it for 3 or 4 weeks, maybe use it for 3 or 4 weeks, then sell the Dob if you get it. And then you're like, you know what? I just can't live with the small scope. Everybody's different. I remember I had a person in my class, and they were somebody who did some different work, and they were somebody who was really fit and everything. And I thought, you know what? This person is a great candidate for like a 10-inch Dob because they're going to have no trouble moving it around. They had a vehicle, I forget if it was a work vehicle or something like that. All their vehicles, a 10-inch Dob would have no trouble going in, and they like to go to dark sky sites. And I said, you should get a 10-inch Dob. This is going to be a great fit for you. Well, it turned out that it wasn't. My recommendation was totally wrong. And they end up going with, I think in the end, they end up going with like a 4-inch refractor of some sort. And so it just goes to show that everybody is different. Even though you've been using the 10-inch Dob, you might get that 3-inch and say, you know what, this is the telescope for me. And I'm just totally good with having a really good 3-inch apochromat. But you won't know it until you try it. I say, you want to try it, go for it. Just do it. This is not going to be the worst decision you make in your life.
Yeah, exactly. And, the other thing too, that just came into my mind, Chris, is going back to that point he mentioned about New Zealand doesn't have a strong, or I shouldn't say strong, but there's not a lot of gear being sold in New Zealand. So the used market is a little thin. If he gets the 76 and he doesn't like it,
he can turn it.
Yeah, I bet he would sell it very quickly. So it's sort of like you're just protected on all fronts here. You'll buy it and love it, or you'll buy it and maybe not love it, and then you can easily sell it.
But then the other thing is that say he decides that he doesn't like little refractors, but he liked the 10-inch quite a bit more. Well, then maybe the decision is, you know what? Go for the 12, go for the 16, really go for the telescope then, because now you know that you're somebody like I was talking to my buddy Peter. We're going to have him on the show, or he would have already been on the show by the time people hear this anyway. And he went and bought a 5-inch apochromat, maybe in part from my influence after looking through mine so much. And then he came back to me and said, you know what? It was fun, really great views. And he bought like an astrophysics, bought like the best 5-inch apochromat you can get, 130 millimeter EDF something or other. But he said, you know what? I'm a big Dob guy. That's what I like. I like to have my 24-inch Dob. That's me. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Nothing wrong with that at all. That's Peter. I'm a little bit different. Shane's a little bit different. I'm sure Andrew's going to really sort this out. So Andrew might come back and say, you know what? I want a 20-inch Dob. I want a 25-inch Dob. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this for a while, save up my money, sell this once I get close, and then fund that 25-inch Dob. And you haven't wasted any time or money. You've had a different experience. You've learned a few different things. Either way, you're going to become a better observer, and you're going to learn something. I think it's a good idea. Go for it.
Agreed. Yep. Love it.
Glenn wrote us an email and some advice from his Australia observing sessions. Do you want to read this one, Shane?
Yes. Let me just pull this
up.
Okay. If you're... Hi, Chris and Shane. Thanks for all of your efforts creating the show. Enjoying it very much. Listening to episode 291. I think you were after viewing information for the Southern Hemisphere. I use the astronomy yearbooks and planisphere from what is it here? quasarastronomy.com.au for all of my viewing in Oz. Hope this helps. Kind regards. So appreciate that, Glenn. It's always good to have some Southern Hemisphere resources because, as we've said, you and I, Chris, we don't go there. So as such, we just don't have as much, I think, knowledge or resources to share with everybody.
I did go to quasarastronomy.com.au though,
Mhm.
and that looks like a great site. They have some star charts there. I think it's somehow associated with Sky and Telescope Australia. Although when I looked, they seem to have this other magazine there too. And they sell planispheres and, like I said, other star charts. So that seemed like a great resource for people that either are in the Southern Hemisphere, or maybe they're looking to visit like New Zealand or Australia or some other place down south. I know that South Africa has, I forget what it's called, and I should know it, but they have another astronomy group down there that has similar publications as well. I think we've talked about that in the past. We really should gather all of these up. I really do want to get down to the Southern Hemisphere at some point. And by really, I mean, I really have to. And I really should like corral these resources, not only for myself, but make them available for the listeners somehow. I think it would be really great. But thank you so much, Glenn, for your contribution there. We appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
So, had a lot of submissions for observations, sketches, and images of Comet 2022 E3 ZTF. So we're only going to pick like a small sampling of these to read. This one comes from Matthew. It says, "Hey, Chris and Shane, hope all is well up north with you two, and that you're all getting some clear nights to observe. We are not." Matthew also says that he was unwell for a while. He had caught COVID during the beginning of the year, but is gradually getting better and now has the weather to do some observing. He says, "Anyway, I've really been enjoying the podcast while I've been under the weather. Dang, that would have been great for the pun contest." Although the weather hasn't been good for several weeks, the skies did clear up the night before last, which was back in the end of January. And I was able to get the equipment out and get under the stars. I've been wanting to send you guys some observing logs for a while now, but still not actually able to sit down and turn his pages of notes into anything usable just quite yet. So since you're all talking about recent comet observations with the CE 2022 E3 ZTF, I want to share my observation of the comet, which I also posted on Cloudy Nights. He goes on to say, "Got the opportunity to spend several hours hanging out with the comet yesterday morning. Thanks to bad weather and COVID, this was the first chance I got to observe it this year. So I jumped all over it. The weather warmed up over the past few weeks, brought some storms, but Astrophysics was calling for some clearing, and there was very light winds with good transparency and zero cloud cover. So since I'd been up since 5:30 a.m. local time for work, I decided to set up my gear at dusk, which was an 8-inch Dob, some really large 25 by 100 and 15 by 70 binoculars on parallelogram mounts. He got everything lined up, went to sleep, and woke up at 3 a.m., made some strong coffee, and started observing at 3:30 a.m., and was able to observe until 6 a.m. when twilight began to interfere. He drank some more coffee and then took a look at Mercury. He says, "My setup was in my driveway, a rural area in the foothills of North Carolina that's unfortunately started trending towards Bortle 4, which is still pretty good. Although I spent some time observing with both pairs of binoculars, the majority of time was spent looking through the scope. And he was using about 100x and 40x using the Delos eyepiece as well as the 30 millimeter ultra flat field. He found E3 ZTF up in Boots, and it was about 10 degrees towards the horizon. It was easy to see in his 50 millimeter finder scope, and in the eyepiece, the comet appeared as a very bright gray glow radiating out from a very bright central nucleus and looked like a defocused star. I could almost convince myself that there was some green color there, but the recent media attention probably biased me towards that." He goes on to say, "I spent some more time and started picking up some detail, especially using averted vision and tapping the focuser. I started to pick up the V fan shape, and to my surprise, the tail was actually the most visible in my 25 by 100 millimeter binoculars, showing a well-defined short fan-shaped tail with a split. My 15 by 70 show the comet and tail fairly well, but without as much detail as the 100 millimeters and without the split. I was also super excited to watch the actual movement of the comet relative to the background stars over the course of the evening." So thank you very much for that, Matthew. That's really really nice to read. Somebody had some good success. So next up, Richard sent us some emails. or some images with a short email. Shane, did you want to take a read of this?
Yeah. I don't know where this one starts, actually.
It says,
so I'm not.
Richard wrote with some images. It's at the bottom of page 4.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So.
Here we go. Hi, Chris and Shane. I listen to your podcast all the time since the article Sky News came out last year featuring you guys. Thanks for all your hard work on the podcast. I'm mainly an imager, but you have inspired me to grab my 9x63 Celestron binoculars and use them while my imaging rig is set up and taking pictures, although I could not see it from my backyard in Edmonton. This was Sunday night's results with my Skywatcher 120 ED with a 0.85 reducer, no filter, rising cam color Astro camera, on top of a Celestron AVX mount. I captured 195 images of 30 seconds each, almost 2 hours of travel. I was surprised to find these beautiful streamers coming out of the nucleus after stacking in Deep Sky Stacker and some processing in PixInsight. This will probably be my last time I'm able to get out and image it, but I was glad I did, especially after listening to your How to See the Comet episode I just got finished listening to today. Thanks again, and hope you enjoy the images.
These are awesome.
Yeah, they're great.
They are so good. They are so good.
The what did he call them? Spikes, or
they're like streamers.
Yeah, streamers. Out. Yeah. It's amazing. Like it looks like a bicycle wheel almost.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah, like with the spokes kind of coming off from the nucleus. There's I don't know. There's got to be 20-ish, maybe more. Just quick estimation, and yeah,
there's like 15 or 16 really bright ones. Then the longer you look, you see more. You know what it reminds me of, which I've never seen anywhere but here, and I'm sure they have them in other places. Is there's these seed pods that blow around here at some point in the summer or the autumn. They're pretty big. Every once in a while, I find one in the house. I don't know what they're for exactly. They look like a massive version of like a dandelion that's gone to seed, but there's not quite as many. And that's what it reminds me of. I wish I knew what those were, but just all those streamers are super neat. And we've had a few sets of images from people and a few sets of sketches. The sketches, most of the sketches people sent do show the fan-shaped tail. And then we could see like that division that was spoken about in the previous email. And then these images really show just the detail that's there. We also had observation here from Jim. Do you mind if I read this? And maybe we'll get you to read Clint's last email after this.
Yeah, sounds good.
Jim observed the comet with his 6x40, my apologies, his 6x30 Kawa binoculars and his Canon 15x50 IS and his little Starblast 4.5-inch reflector. And I really, really like this combination of gear. This is just like wide field nirvana, if you ask me. He's got a really low power, small binocular that's easy to handhold. He's got an image stabilized binocular that has a really wide field, but there's a pretty big difference between a 6X and a 15X binocular. So that's a huge jump. And then with the IS, he's going to see even more of a bump. And then the Starblast is really going to take him into that nice wide field telescopic range. So what a great combination of gear Jim has. And Jim also wrote us this amazing observing report. I hope we can put more of that in a future show. He's on an expedition or a mission, I think is like an actual mission with NASA right now. So in the future, we're going to try to get into that. For this one, though, Jim goes on to say, the comet appeared fairly large and looked kind of like the M13 globular cluster does in handheld binoculars, only bigger. The head of the comet may have presented as a brighter core closest to the leading edge. Try as I might with averted vision, I could not see a tail, even when I maxed out my averted imagination. My point for those that don't make it to a dark site is to try to view it with any binoculars every chance you get. Plus, practicing finding it in the city will make finding it from a dark site that much easier, and your early morning viewing time that much more productive. So I really like that, because when I found this as well, sometimes I will go and just try to find stuff in the city or under lesser skies, or even if I'm at my dark sky site and I have several nights, but I have a night that's just maybe the transparency just isn't that great. And I say like it's finding fields. I always call this like the finding fields night. And I go out and I'm like, well, I want to see these things. They're not going to be visible tonight, but I can kind of get the star pattern. I can get the general finding the right area down. And then I know what the area looks like without that thing in it. And then I go out, hopefully like the next night is going to be clear, and then I can go out and find it. Well, he's kind of doing the same thing from the city. So he's got some pretty good gear, and then especially great gear for looking at comets or relatively bright comets with. And so he's finding the field, he's getting some observing in the hopes that maybe he gets out to a dark sky site, or he might not be able to get to a dark sky site, but at least he gets some observations of the comet in. Doesn't quite get that tail that maybe he was looking for. But the other thing is that maybe on subsequent nights, Jim is able to get out and he gets a slightly better night from the city, or finds a slightly better spot, or maybe there's a little blackout or something, and he gets lucky, and then he's able to see that tail. But regardless, he was able to get out and to see that comet as well. So I think that's a good story for making good use of your time with your equipment and trying to see stuff, even if the conditions aren't quite ideal.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. How about Clint?
Yeah. So Clint says, for Christmas, my wife bought me a new heated vest and some heated insoles. I figured the cold, clear night was perfect for testing the new gear. It was also likely the only chance I would have to see the green comet. It was -9 degrees Fahrenheit here, so -23 Celsius. I am pleased to say that the heated clothing works wonders. I could have stayed out until the batteries died. The only part of me that got cold was my hands while holding the binoculars. I did not stay out long and did not go to my dark site. I just looked from the backyard. The comet was not obvious naked eye, but was not difficult to find in my 10 by 50 binoculars. Right now, the comet is sitting about 3/5 of the distance between the Big Dipper's pointer star and Polaris. There are 2 6 magnitude stars just off to the west of it, making confirmation fairly certain. I definitely could not see any green coloration in the comet, and I did not notice any tail. I have heard that in the right lighting, it is possible to see the dust tail and an ion tail. Perhaps if I had gone to my dark site, I would have had better results. What I did notice was a bright core and a rather large cloud, roughly 10, is that arc minutes or arc seconds in diameter? The cloud was slightly oval-shaped, but nearly round. After finding it in the binoculars, I thought I could just make it out naked eye while using averted vision. But I'm not certain if I could really see it or if my brain was just trying to see something that my eyes were not. My skies are too light polluted to see the 6 magnitude stars to the west of the comet without the binoculars, and I feel the comet was not much brighter than these stars. Perhaps it would be possible if I got up early when the moon set, but I like sleep too much for that. Clear skies, Clint. I could certainly understand the heated clothing comments. They really do make a huge difference, particularly in those cold temperatures. It's just... it's heaven, to observe with that heat source going. And Clint's observations really match quite closely what I saw in my backyard with my 12 by 36 binoculars. Was it a week or two ago? I can't remember, Chris, but Mike, our observing friend who was on the podcast just a few episodes ago, sent us a text message that he was observing the comet. And I was busy watching TV and doing a few other things around the house that I didn't even realize it was clear out. So I quickly put on my heaviest winter jacket, my heavy boots, grabbed the binoculars, and it took me a couple sweeps through the field to find it. But yeah, it is quite large. Certainly could make out the nucleus and this kind of oval cloud that he was talking about. And similarly, I was unable to see the tail, but it was quite obvious and quite large is what I would say.
So you have some of the heated clothing as well, don't you?
Yeah, I have a heated jacket and I have heated gloves.
Okay.
I'm not loving the gloves all that much. Part of it is just the design. Okay. The battery pack sort of sits on top of your wrist and it's somewhat large. So it interferes with my watch, and it sometimes is hard to get tucked in nicely into my jacket. So I really haven't used the gloves all that much, but the jacket is outstanding. I can be out in, you name, like the coldest night, possible. And well, the one test that I did, I just sat in the backyard for 45 minutes without moving on a night when the base temperature was like minus 32 and there's a wind chill factor that was closer to minus 40. And I had my binoculars and I just observed. And after about 45 minutes, I went indoors just because I was done observing, but it wasn't because I was cold.
That's amazing. And I'm sure your neighbors enjoyed that as well. I got to get some of this stuff. In particular, I think I'd missed that they've made these heated insoles. So in general, I'm not too bad everywhere else. Although I notice, this is what I noticed. This is when I think I need it. So typically when it's super cold, like when we're getting minus 40 or even colder, I'm not going out as much as I did when I was, half my age. And but I do like to go out when it warms up. So for example, even yesterday I went out to check on my cabin, and it had warmed up to only -5. So it's not really that cold out at all. But I was out kind of walking around and my feet were freezing. So were my wife's. And and I always forget this, but when we have really, really cold weather for like several days or a couple of weeks or sometimes even a month, if we're not lucky, we can get a month of -30 or colder. And that cold goes into the ground. And then when it warms up, that cold comes out of the ground. So even though in general, the air temperature 6 inches and above the ground might be at, I don't know, like -5 or whatever, that layer right in contact with the ground, if your feet are in contact with the ground at all, can be like -20 still. And I find it's like coming out of the ground. So it's just penetrating your feet. And my feet were freezing, even though -5 is not cold at all. And I've certainly been out for long periods of time wearing the exact same clothing and not had any cold feet at all at -5. So I think I got to look at getting a pair of these heated insoles. I got to get a pair of these for sure, I think.
Yeah, I've never tried those. What I did is I bought some. The brand is Baffin boots, and they have different degrees of insulation, and I bought the heaviest insulated ones that they have, and they're outstanding. But again, they're more for if you're going to walk 3 to 5 kilometers, you probably want more of a hiker. These are more, you're probably not moving a lot, and ideal for astronomy, really.
Yeah, I got to get something like that too, because like now that I have a place where I can go and observe, and go in and take my boots off and then just put them on just when I'm observing. Because that's one of those things, like I think a boot like that might be difficult to drive in, right?
Yeah, probably a little bit. Yeah.
Probably not recommended, like driving with a pair of flippers on, and anyway, but like in the fall when I was going out and there was some cold days and I was observing, I was still just wearing my hiking boots that I kind of wore when I drove out. I took an extra pair of sneakers out with me, but I think I needed some warmer boots for those nights. But anyway, with that, Shane, do you have anything else to add? We got through a few listener emails. There's absolutely no way we can now read all the listener emails we get in the run of a week, but we do certainly read them all. And I think we're still pretty good at replying to the majority of them.
Yeah, exactly. We do try to reply to all of them if we can. And, we'll have to curate some for the show because like you say, there's just too many to get through, which is great. We love it.
Oh yeah, we do love it. It's very motivating to create the podcast and then to hear back from people. The things that people like, the things that people are observing, because that really helps guide us in what we include for content and the new content that we're going to try to be making here in the coming months. Super excited about some of the new things we're going to attempt to do, and hopefully maybe even try to record some of our own observations as we get into some warmer weather in the spring.
Yeah, exactly.
With that, we'll sign off. And if you have any observations, observing reports, observing logs, if you have any show ideas or any questions for us, we're always happy to hear them. You can email us at actualastronomy@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the show. If you are interested in more information, would like to contact us, or if you would like to support the podcast, check out our website, actualastronomy.com.